Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel Techie Kumar. So today we are going to learn one of the most important thing in application, that is logging. So let's start. So when a developer develops an application and it goes into production, if everything runs well then it's fine, but if something goes wrong and we get an defect, so in that case it would be very difficult to find out a section or a piece of code which is breaking the application. So in most of the situation, what we do, we go to server, we see logs, and we try to find out the exception print stack trace. So if we find, then after we can proceed like what is the what kind of exception we have received, and we will try to understand in the business flow at which point it may have broken. Sometimes it seems easy, but sometimes it's very difficult. To make the debugging very easy for a developer, so we should, this is my recommendation, we should always log each request and response of the API. Whatever activity a user is doing, that can be tracked by logging HTTP request and response. So we will see in the code, like if something goes wrong, we can easily identify what is wrong with the request, or if request is correct, so we can see what is the response, because response includes everything. If something goes wrong at your server level, that will also be mapped, logged there. It also includes like maybe some JSON mismatch, maybe you are using some incorrect fields from the UI end, or maybe the values are not proper. So most of, I can say 90% of the issues will be resolved just by looking at the request and response. Only 10% effort is required to find out where is the loophole in the business logic. And that is also easy. Once you have a request, you can connect your local system, local application with the postman, and you can find out using the debug mode at which point business logic is failing. So let's see, I have created a very simple project which can help you to understand how we can implement the logging thing in your application. So first of all, let me explain you how it is going to work here, and then we will go through the code. So guys, you may have heard, or you may all have knowledge about filters. So those who doesn't know about filters, so that's fine, no need to worry. And those who knows, they are also going to learn something new here. So let's start. So whenever a user make a request, it comes to our server. So let's consider this is the server, and inside server, this is the server, and inside server we will have a container. Which container? The web container, right? Like the web container provided by Tomcat, or maybe middleware, maybe WebLogic. So that's why we will have one container. So this is the application container. So you can say like web container Tomcat. I'm considering here Tomcat. Fine. So whenever request comes after, if the URLs and if URLs are right, then it hits the server. Now it finally reaches to the web container. So in the web container, our application is up and running. So in there we will have one section that is called filters. Filter. Okay. And this is the web application. This is your Spring app. So whenever request comes, it comes to filter, then after it goes to a Spring app where we will have the dispatcher servlet. So it goes to your Spring app, and similarly when the application completes its process, it returns back and it passes to filter, and then after it reaches to the user. So it's very simple. Like, we have a layer of filters, or you can say chain of filters. There can be one or more filters. So here I'm not going to discuss about the various types of filters and what they they have different functions, how they do work. I'm not going to talk in much detail, but the only thing you need to learn here is filters are there to perform some actions on your HTTP request, and once the action is done, then after it passes that this request to the dispatcher servlets. Okay, so now what we are trying to do here, the purpose behind logging is, so we are trying to do, whenever a user make a request, that request reaches to server, that request should reach the server, process it, and then before returning the response, it should be logged into DB. This is your DB. So each request and response will be logged into DB. That is what we want to do. And here I said, right, we have filters here. So we have a filter and we have a Spring application. So I mean, here only I can explain, right? So here it's like, it is going to record your request in DB, and then after it return the response. So it's very simple, straightforward. We are going to use filter to apply this logic, and the purpose behind this is just to log the HTTP request and response into the database. So let's go through the code, and it's very simple project I have created. And don't worry about the code, you don't need to write as it now. You just go through the GitHub and you can find this project there. Okay, so take your time, go through that, and you will understand like how easy it is to implement, but it is how helpful that also you will come to know. So let's get into the code. So here is the application. I have named it as Spring log request response here, and you can see in Spring, in application.properties file, I have mentioned my MySQL database. I have created one database, user DB, and these are the properties I have set. So these are the straightforward properties. I don't think this needs any explanation. The last property I have used just to maintain the column names or column order, specifically the column names, not order. So like if this makes the column names as case sensitive. Now let's move to other files. Okay, so here you can see various packages created. We have config, controller, DAO, DTO, entity, filter, and service. So let's go one by one. So I'll start from controller. So I have created a controller, user controller, which has multiple APIs endpoint. For example, we have add, which is responsible for adding a user. Then we have a update user using the put mapping HTTP method. So we will pass the object, and that object will be updated by ID. Then we have a get mapping. Whenever we want to get the list of all users, we will have list, you just listed here. So this is the request mapping / user. Okay, we have a service interface. So let's get into the implementation. So in the user service, let me show you here. So in user service, we have three abstract methods: add user, update user, and get all user. So here we have the implementation in user service IMPL, and this implementation we are using model mapper. The purpose behind using model mapper is to map the two objects, copy data from one object to another object, provided they have a similar fields name. Okay, so this is one library I have used. So let me also go through the pom.xml file. So here, as a dependency, I have used very less dependencies: spring data jpa to store data into database, spring boot starter web to create a web application. This is for creating connection between MySQL and my application. And I have also used Lombok. You definitely know, right? Lombok is just to reduce the boilerplate code from your application. And then we have the test, and here I have used another library which is model mapper. So that's it. I mean, these 4 or 5 dependencies I have used in my pom.xml. Now let's show you how I'm getting this model mapper object. So for that I have created a config class, and from there this is the configuration, and there I have mentioned the bean name for model mapper. So whenever the application start, it will provide the instance of this model mapper. The same instance I'm using here in user service IMPL object mapper. So here we are taking request in a format, and then we have a different response. So that's why we have two DTO. One is request, another is response. So let's go into the DTO package. So here's the DTO. So we have two: user DTO request and user DTO response file. So user DTO request has first name, last name, mobile name, nationality, and the response has ID. So whenever we pass the user details, we will not have ID. System will generate an ID for that user, and you will get that in response. So that's why we have used the DTO. So user DTO. So these are two files. Let me close them. That's not required now. Oh, one more thing. As I said, I'm using Lombok, so you can see that we have data, or our data will take care of the creating of setters and getters. No are constructor, all are constructors, and toString. This is the similar thing like creating a no are constructors manually, and all argument constructors, and toString, overriding the toString method. So it's like just reducing the boilerplate code. Okay, so now here we are in service IMPL, and we were discussing about the user entity here. So user, from controller we will get a request object in the form of user DTO request, but our service layer accepts entity, user entity. So let me go through that. So you can see here I have created entity. There are two entities: user entity and log request and response entity. So we'll come to that log request response entity. Let's see user entity as of now. So I have created the similar kind of Pojo, which has the ID which is auto generated, and the table name is user. So this is the very simple Pojo class or entity which is going to hold the user information. Now we have what we are doing. We are taking the request, and we are using the object model mapper to map those objects into a new, the filled values into a new object, that is user entity, and that user entity we are passing to DAO. So you can see this is the DAO, user entity DAO. So let me show you the DAO as well. So here we have a package DAO. So we have created the user DAO which extends JPA repository. Then coming back to user service IMPL, and once the user entity is saved, it provides data in the form of user entity. then we need to convert them back to user DTO response. So this is very simple 3-line code which is saving the user entity, and then we are converting that user entity into the user DTO response using model mapper. Similarly, we have also here update user. There I have created a consumer. What it does, it finds the user by ID. Once the user is available, if it is present, it updates the it calls use the function of consumer. In the consumer, you can see I have called user save user, and if it is not, then we are throwing the exception, throw new exception user not found. Okay, and get all users, this is straightforward, that is find all jp repository method we are calling, and we will get a list of user entity, and we are just here mapping that user entity list to user DTO response list. So very simple code we have written here. Now let's go back to the controller. So we also saw, right, the controller here. Now let me show you how I have implemented the filter part. So if I go to filter, so as I said, I have created a entity log request response. So we are going to have a table with name log request response, and columns will be ID, endpoint, request, and http method response, and timestamp request response. So http method will hold the information about the type of http method used while calling the API. Then we will have the request, and we will have the response and the timestamp. I have used the annotation of JPA, that is creation timestamp. Whenever this request was made, that will be by default stored while storing this entity. So hope it's very clear. Now let me show you the one more thing here, that is what I wanted to show you very early. So now we discussed about an application which has the capability to expose 2 or 3 endpoints, and that will be stored into the database. Now we are going to discuss about the logging. So for logging, as I said, like we have used concept of filter. So what I have done, I have used one API. I'm really sorry, I have used one filter, that is once let me open there. Yeah, here is the package, right? So I have extended the once per request filter, and I have named it as a log once per request filter. Okay, so whenever you extend this filter, you need to override do filter internal. So there will have three arguments. So the first one holds the request, second one holds the response, and the third one is filter chain. So as I said, in your application there may be one or more filters. So how we work, we always we take action on the current request, and then we pass that request to the next filter. So that's why we have a filter chain. Maybe in another video we can discuss this filter in detail. So here what I'm doing, I'm using content caching request wrapper, a class provided by Spring Framework. What it does, it takes the HTTP servlet request and makes you enable to convert those requests into a string. So you can see that here, and then after, similarly I have used the request wrapper, caching request wrapper, caching response wrapper, which holds the request and response, and here request and response, and then we pass that request response to the next filter. After passing this request response to the next filter, what we are doing, we are converting that request byte array. So we are using that get content as byte array, and I have created a private method which takes this byte array data and character encoding, and it returns you as a string. So here you can say I have created variable data as a string, so we will have the request object as a string that can be saved into database. So now finally, after having the request and response as a string, we are calling a method called log request response. This method is a private method created by me here. You can see we are taking request, response, URI and HTTP method. So this is the entity. So I'm creating an object of that entity. I'm setting these values. What are the values? Request, response, URI and HTTP method, and then calling the DAO, logging DAO, we are persisting the request response. So let me show you, we have also DAO here. As I said, see here we have a logging DAO which has extended the JPA repository. So using this repository method save, we are persisting this information. Now let's run this application and see how it works. I'm going to run this application now. So I have selected here Spring Log Request Response. I'll start this application. Okay, so you can see application started, and here you can find that tables are created, log request response, and we have another table called user. So if I go to DB, so let me refresh this and let me close all. Okay, so we have if I just query this table, there is no information, but table is created, ID, endpoint, and there is information. Similarly, if I go to users, so there is no information about the user. So what we'll do, we'll go to Insomnia here and we'll make some request to add user. So I'm going to add my details here, the first name, okay. So click here. So one user is added. Now let's go back to database and see like how it looks. Okay, so let me refresh this. So one entry came here, and we can see like details are available whatever we have provided. Now we need to see like whether it is logged into the database, the request response of this request or not. So let's go to here, this table, and refresh it. Oh, here you go. So you can see that we have logged the endpoint slash user add, and we've also logged the HTTP method, the request and the response. So now you can see like this looks different, request data looks different from response. The reason behind is we have used here beautification, that's why it's going in this format. If you use your application, your request and response will come in a proper format. But anyways, so this is going to help you. So let me just copy this, and see, this is the request. So you can also, let's take this one here. You can say like JSON formatter, online JSON viewer I have bookmarked already. So here you just paste your code and come to viewer. So see how it looks nice, right? So you have the request. Now if I go to my DB, I'll try to fetch the response as well. So I'll open another tab, and in another tab I will use this, and let's see. So this one is, the first one is request, second one is response with ID. That's the difference. I mean, in real time we will have different information, but as of now the request DTO and response DTO has a difference of ID. Okay, so now how it is going to help us. So we made a request. So now let's go and hit another APIs to see how it works. So I have already hit, so I'll just try to use my history. So let's say I'm going to use users. So it's like I'm calling get, so you can just ignore this one, get, so nobody, right? And just call it. So whatever the user it's created, we have called. So if I made another request, let's say I'm going to add one more user here. Let's say, see, I have added another user, Sonu Sood Indian. So I can just hit send. This is the old data. You can, so if I click here, okay. So if I go and run the get method, okay. So now we have the HTTP method. So let's go to DB and see how it looks. We have made multiple requests, so you can see different all the HTTP methods are logged here, request response. In case of get, there will be no request because get, in case of get, we are not sending any payload, but we will have the response. So now here we have called and we have the response. Let me copy this and go to browser, and I'm really sorry, close this, and let's go here. Okay, I have done mistake, I didn't copy that, I guess. So this is the user get call. Copy and then come here. Okay, good. So now we have two users, Prabhakar and Sonu. So you can see that, okay. So now we were discussing how it is going to help us. So generally at any point of time, you can come to your DB if you know the timestamp, right? So you can do a query, and if you know the range, right? So where you can just copy this is less than, or maybe you can say greater than, or just copy this, your timestamp, and mention here. So when you execute this, so it's nothing is greater than this one, right? Yeah, so anything less than this we can find. So similarly, you can, you can use the timestamp to find the request and response, because you might know about the time when it occurs, or you can get this information from the customer at what time they got this error. So using that range, time range, you can find out the request and response, and you can, looking at the HTTP calls, right, you can easily identify the way the user has navigated from the applications. So you can try to reproduce the same issue through this orders in which this request and response are being persisted into the DB. And let me do some more testing here. So if I go to Postman, and if I try to add a user, let me add a user to do some error. So how to do that? Okay, so let me go here and take one post, add, and in this one I can use some, I'll try to break this. Okay, I'm going to just make it test. Let's see if it's breaking. So you can see that first name is null. So let's say, like, if user complains that I have saved the first name but it's appearing null, so you can easily go into the DB, you come to EB, excuse me, okay, sorry, I need to change. Okay, let's remove this where clause. that's not required, right? Okay, so this is the recent last post. So when I take this, right, so if I take this request and copy it here, sorry, paste it here, go to viewer, so you can see like what is the field name test. So you can easily identify the request object has some problem, the field is not the same what you are expecting at the service layer. So you can easily communicate with your UI guy and say like, see, field mapping is incorrect. So you can imagine how easy it is. With the help of request and response, you can fix things within a minute. And the most important thing, you can identify the problem if something goes wrong. Okay, so that's the thing. So let me throw some exception here. I'm going to try to search an user with a wrong ID. Maybe let's we search it with a valid ID first. So we added Sonu and the ID is 2. So before that, let me make it like get all the users list first to show you guys. So this will be nobody. It doesn't matter whether you select it or not. So we got a timestamp. It's saying that internal server error. So let me see what's wrong here. So how we can do, we can go to DB first. Okay, so this exception happened because we have different endpoint. This is the 500 internal server error happened. So for that, what you can do, I think we are using /user and we have, okay, get method user. Okay, let me see what's wrong here. There must be something wrong in the log. Let me check. Okay, so guys, this is the error what we are receiving while persisting the data. So it is saying that data truncation, data too long for column response. Okay, so we got this error. We got this error because the response, this one, right, this table, this column has a length very less. So what we could do, go to log. I mean, this is the error from your database, so it doesn't create any problem. You can create a table with a valid column length, column width, and that will solve your problem. So here you can see that we have 255. So we can like takes varchar and we apply. Is it done? No change detected. Okay, so you can, I mean, you have to increase that. Let me make it like 4,000, or maybe we can make it like 2,000. That makes sense. Apply, close. So this I did for request. Similarly, let's do it for response. Make it 2,000. Okay, so we have modified the table. Now the column width for request and response is 2000 characters. So let's see if it works. Let me close this and retry again. Where we go, okay, so this is the error what we received. So let's go down and let's go to here. Okay, so now, I mean, there was no problem in our API, but the problem was while saving this data, because we have taken as a varchar, right? So actually, I mean, you have to go with the proper data type while creating the table, so that you can hold the request response, which has very big size. So that was the problem. So now it is fixed, and this response is stored in your db. So let me just refresh, go to, I didn't show you, right? All users are getting added here. Let me go here and just refresh this. So you can see the recent one, the 8th request is get, and we got the response. Okay, now let me break this. So if I just go with, like, let's say 4 here, I haven't created a user with the id 4, but I'm trying to find a user with id 4. So excuse me, so you can see that user controller here, we have a excuse me, yeah, we have a put mapping. So what we'll do, we'll try to update a user with the given id, but we don't have that user id, then definitely we will get an exception. So let me just take one post call from my history. So let's say this is the post call. I'll make it like first name, and in this post, instead of post, I will use put, because that's the http method what we are using, put mapping, and we are trying to update a user with id 4, but in our db there is no user named as id 4. So let me send this. So we got an exception, user not found. So let's see what is stored in the database. Okay, so you can see this in response, we found user not found, and the user is. So if someone says, like, I'm trying to update my update my information in the application, but nothing has happened, every time I'm getting the same response, every time I'm not seeing the changes in the application, it's not reflecting. So in that case, you can come easily to your this logging table, and you can get the timestamp. Using the timestamp, you can get the api call, and you have the endpoint. You can see, like, what user has passed while calling this action, and you will have the request as well as you will have the response. So this makes very clear idea what had happened in the past when the user was using the application, and you will have the track of his flow, his actions, whatever he has taken while using the application. And that is the most important thing while fixing defect in production. So I mean, in, let's suppose we don't have this application, this implementation. So in that case, the approach would be, you will go to the server logs, you will fetch the server log of that particular day, you will go through the log file, you will try to find a log. Okay, and if suppose you have not done a proper logging while developing the application, in my case I haven't logged anything as of now, because this is a very simple project. So you can see, like, I have not used logger anywhere. So you are not going to find the flow, like what is flow, how it is working. You are not going to get that. So what I'm saying, yeah, so you are not going to get it anything from the logger information, because I have not logged it. So now here this logging request table is going to help you, otherwise it would be very difficult. And trust me, this is the real scenario I'm discussing. We, in an application, we have come across such situations where request and response are not getting logged. Developers were just logging the request, logging the data in the specific methods, that I'm inside this method, or maybe the method name, but they didn't log the request and response. So we have to, like, go into the code, get that logger information, whatever the mentioned in their code, and then try to find in the server log. But we don't need to do that much. We just need to come here, get the timestamp, and you should know, like, which api is causing problem, or you can go through the flow itself, like what are the steps user has done. So if you select the date of yesterday or maybe some specific date, then definitely you will get all the actions done at that particular time or particular day. So that will make your life easy. So I believe I have covered everything whatever I have to discuss today about this logging request and response. It's really very easy for implementation. You go through the code, and this code is available on GitHub. I will share the link in the comments below, and you can just have a fun. Just it's very simple. Go through, guys. I have tried here to use the proper flow, use the proper architecture, MVC pattern, MVC flow, right? MVC pattern. I have created controllers, service layer, DAO layers, entities. So I have followed the standard protocols here. So go through the code. If you have any doubt, you can put a comment, and I'll try to answer them. But I think as of now we have covered everything. Okay, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you really like it and it is going to help you, so please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe my channel. Thank you so much. Bye.